My younger brother secretly sold my $9 million farmhouse for just $3 million. And called me saying, I spent all the money on my girlfriend's business. She needed IT more than you. I immediately canceled my trip and rushed home. But when I arrived, I couldn't hold my laughter because the farmhouse he sold was actually, my younger brother secretly sold my $9 million farmhouse for just $3 million and called me saying, I spent all the money on my girlfriend's business. She needed it more than you. I immediately canceled my trip and rushed home. But when I arrived, I just smiled because the farmhouse he sold was actually, I never thought I'd return to Grandfather Henry's farm like this. But life has a way of dragging you back to places you never planned on seeing again, especially when betrayal forces your hand. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I was finishing up a research report on sustainable irrigation techniques in my Denver office. My phone buzzed, and I almost ignored it until I saw the name, Liam. We hadn't talked much in the past few years. He was always chasing his next business idea, and I was too buried in my work to get involved in family matters. But something in my gut told me to answer. Natalie. Liam's voice was too smug, too casual. I figure I should let you know I sold the farm. For a moment I thought I misheard. You what? The farm, Grandpa's farm, got $900,000 for it. He said like it was just another deal, not the place where we spent our childhood summers, where Grandfather Henry built his entire life's work. My grip on the phone tightened. You sold it? Without even talking to me? Liam sighed, annoyed. Come on, Natalie. You haven't set foot on that land in years. You're too busy with your scientist life in Denver. The farm was just sitting there collecting dust. My chest burned with anger. You had no right to do that, Liam. He laughed, a sharp, careless sound. Actually, I did. I was named executor. That means I get to make the calls. I could barely process the words. Where's the money? There was a pause, then a chuckle. I spent it. I went cold. What do you mean you spent it? My girlfriend Olivia, her business needed a boost, Liam said, as if that explained everything. She had this amazing investment opportunity, and she needed funds fast. I helped her out. I felt like the air had been knocked from my lungs. You sold our grandfather's farm for half of its real value and blew the money on Olivia's business? She needed it more than you, Liam shot back, defensive now. You don't need the money, Natalie. You have your career, your fancy research projects. What do you care about an old farm? I ended the call without another word. I didn't trust myself to speak. Within an hour, I had booked the next flight to Austin, Texas. The entire trip, my mind raced. How could Liam do this? He had always been reckless. But this? This wasn't just bad judgment, this was theft. By the time I landed, my anger had turned into something sharper, determination. He thought he could get away with this, but he didn't know one thing. Grandfather Henry wasn't a fool, and I had a feeling he had seen this coming. When I arrived at the farm, or what was left of it, I felt a wave of emotions. Memories flooded back. Summer mornings feeding the horses, the smell of fresh soil after it rained, the sound of grandfather's laughter echoing from the front porch. And now? The land was abandoned, overgrown. The heart of our family sold like it was nothing. I needed answers, and there was only one person who could give them to me. Walter Bennett, my grandfather's longtime lawyer, was waiting when I arrived at his Dallas office the next morning. He looked up from his desk as I entered, his sharp eyes filled with something close to expectation. I was wondering when you'd show up, Natalie, he said, gesturing for me to sit. I didn't waste time. Liam sold the farm. Without my consent, he says he had the right. Walter sighed, tapping his fingers against a thick folder on his desk. Yes. I received the notice yesterday. I stared at him. So that's it? He wins. Walter gave a small smile. That depends. Have you read your grandfather's final estate documents? A strange feeling stirred in my chest. I read the will. It left everything to both of us, but Liam was executor. Walter nodded. That's true. But your grandfather was a very careful man. He slid the folder toward me. 2 weeks before he passed, he filed an amended deed. I hesitated before opening it. The first page immediately caught my eye. Character clause? I read aloud. Walter's expression turned serious. Henry knew Liam's weaknesses. He loved him, but he didn't trust him with the farm. So, he added a safeguard. If either of you attempted to sell the farm without the other's agreement, ownership would immediately and irrevocably transfer to the wronged party. I blinked. Are you saying yes? Walter leaned back in his chair. The sale is void. The farm is yours, Natalie. A mix of relief and shock washed over me. Liam doesn't know about this, does he? Walter shook his head. No. And I'd advise not telling him until we call a legal meeting. I sat back trying to process it all. Grandfather Henry had known. He had seen Liam's recklessness, his greed, and he had planned for it. I clenched my fists. So what now? Walter checked his watch. Now? You get ready. Because, once Liam finds out he's going to fight this, and something tells me, he's not going down without a scene. That evening, I drove back to the farm. I stood on the overgrown land, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the empty fields. This farm wasn't just land. It was my grandfather's legacy. It was everything he had built, everything he had left behind. And Liam had tried to throw it away for a quick payout and a selfish dream. I pulled out my phone. Tomorrow, Liam would learn the truth. He thought he had won. He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke up early, my mind racing with everything that was about to happen. Liam had no idea that his so-called victory was about to collapse right in front of him, and knowing my brother, he wasn't going to take it well. By 10 a.m., I was sitting across from Walter Bennett in his office. He had already arranged a legal meeting, ensuring Liam and his lawyer would be present. I could tell Walter had seen plenty of messy family disputes in his career, but this was personal. Liam arrived 20 minutes late, of course. He strolled in like he owned the place, dressed in an expensive suit that he probably paid for with money he had no right to touch. Olivia followed behind him, her expression set in boredom, clearly annoyed at having to be here. His lawyer, a nervous-looking man barely out of law school, shuffled in behind them, looking overwhelmed. Liam smirked the second he saw me. Wow, Natalie. Didn't think you'd care enough to show up? I ignored the jab and gestured toward the empty chair across from me. Sit down. Liam flopped into the chair with an exaggerated sigh. Let's make this quick. I've got better things to do. Walter cleared his throat, ignoring the attitude. Liam, I assume you're aware that Natalie has concerns regarding the sale of your grandfather's farm. Liam rolled his eyes, leaning back. We've been over this. I was the executor. I had every legal right to sell the property. Walter calmly slid a document across the table. Actually, you didn't. Liam frowned but picked it up. As his eyes scanned the words, his smug expression faded. The arrogance drained from his face and his hands tightened around the paper. For the first time, I saw something I hadn't seen in years, real fear. What is this? His voice wasn't as confident anymore. Walter steepled his fingers. That is the amended deed your grandfather filed 2 weeks before his passing. It contains a character clause stating that if one of his grandchildren attempted to sell the farm without the other's consent, ownership would automatically and irrevocably transfer to the wronged party. Liam's face paled. No, that can't be right. Oh, but it is, I said, my voice steady. The moment you signed that sale agreement, you lost everything. The farm belongs to me now. Liam slammed the document on the table. This is a setup, he snapped. Grandpa wouldn't do this to me. Walter remained calm. Henry Carter knew his grandchildren well, Liam. He knew Natalie would protect the farm, and he knew you. Well, let's just say he anticipated your actions. Liam turned to his lawyer, his voice frantic. Do something. The young man shifted in his seat uncomfortably. Legally speaking, the amendment is binding. The sale is void. Olivia crossed her arms, her voice sharp. So, what does that mean? The money is gone. We already spent it. That's your problem, I said, my tone icy cold. Liam's face twisted in frustration as he pushed away from the table and stood up. You can't just take everything from me? I met his glare. I didn't take it. You threw it away. A heavy silence stretched through the room. Liam had lost completely. Walter sighed and slid another document forward. There's one more issue. As executor, you had a legal duty to uphold the estate's integrity. By selling the farm without Natalie's consent, you violated those duties. He tapped the paper. Effective immediately, you are removed as executor. Liam stared at the paper like it was a death sentence. You're joking. Nope, I said, leaning forward. I'm in charge now. Olivia suddenly stood, grabbing Liam's arm. Liam, we need to go. Liam was frozen in place, still staring at the document. I knew what was going through his mind. He had lost everything. The farm, the money, the control. Walter wasn't done. He picked up another file. One last thing, since the sale is void, that means you owe the estate every single dollar you receive from it. Liam visibly swallowed. I don't have the money. I leaned back in my chair. Then we have a problem, don't we? Olivia, clearly furious, yanked on Liam's arm again. Liam, we're leaving. But before they could reach the door, Walter spoke one last time. Oh, and Liam? He turned, shoulders tense. Any attempt to challenge this legally will result in a full estate audit. Walter's tone was calm but firm. Which means every single financial transaction you made as executor will be investigated. Liam's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what that meant. Every shady deal, every dollar he had funneled into Olivia's business, exposed. He didn't say another word. He just stormed out, Olivia trailing behind him, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. As the door swung shut behind them, I finally exhaled. It was over. At least, I thought it was. That night, I sat on Grandfather Henry's old porch, staring out at the land, the cool Texas air settling around me. I should have felt relief, but something nagged at me. Liam was reckless. But he wasn't stupid. He had to know this was a possibility. He had to know Grandfather Henry would have planned for this. Then why was he so desperate? My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "We need to talk." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. This wasn't over. I stared at Liam's message for a long time. "We need to talk." A part of me wanted to ignore it. I had won. The farm was legally mine, and Liam had lost every ounce of control. But I knew my brother. He didn't just walk away, not without a backup plan. Finally I replied, "Meet me at the farmhouse, 1 hour." By the time I arrived, the sky had darkened, and the air smelled of damp earth, the kind of scent that always came before a storm. The land stretched out in front of me, the fences still broken, the crops overgrown. This place had been abandoned for too long. Liam pulled up in his SUV 10 minutes late, his headlights cutting through the shadows. He got out slowly, looking different this time, tired, nervous. Olivia wasn't with him. For once, it was just the two of us. He shoved his hands into his pockets, avoiding my eyes. "You got what you wanted." I leaned against the porch railing. "Did I?" Liam let out a bitter laugh. "Spare me the lecture, Natalie. You think you're the hero in all this." He gestured at the land. "You left. You had your career, your research, your perfect life. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who took care of everything." I tilted my head, watching him carefully. "You didn't take care of anything, Liam. You sold Grandfather's farm for a quick payday and burned through the money like it was nothing." His jaw tightened. "I was trying to build something." I crossed my arms. "And where is it now?" He didn't answer. And that told me everything. Something in my gut twisted. "Liam, this isn't just about the farm, is it?" He hesitated, his eyes darting away, and for the first time in a long time, I saw it. Fear. I stepped closer. "How bad is it?" Liam ran a hand through his hair, looking anywhere but at me. I borrowed against Grandfather's other accounts. I felt my stomach drop. "What?" He exhaled sharply. "The estate's tax accounts, the maintenance funds, the savings, everything. I pulled from them, thinking I could pay it back before anyone noticed." His voice cracked. "But the investment tanked, the developer went bankrupt. And now," he let out a hollow laugh, "now it's gone." I felt physically sick. "How much?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. $7.50 $0. The world tilted for a second. I pressed my fingers against my forehead, forcing myself to think. "So, that's why you were so desperate to sell the farm?" Liam nodded, looking miserable. "I thought I could fix it before anyone found out." I closed my eyes. "And Olivia?" His laugh was humorless. "She left, took what little she could, and ran the second she realized there was nothing left." A long silence stretched between us. I should have walked away. I should have told Liam this was his mess to fix. But then I thought of Grandfather Henry, of the way he had always believed in second chances. And despite everything, Liam was still my brother. I pulled out my phone, dialed Walter. He answered on the second ring. "I need to see you," I said. "Now." An hour later, Liam and I sat in Walter's office. Walter, unshaken as always, didn't seem surprised when I told him everything. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. "Your grandfather knew this was a possibility," Walter said, sliding the file toward me. "So, he planned for it." I flipped through the pages, my heart racing. Insurance policies, financial safeguards, legal contingencies, things Grandfather Henry had set up long before he passed. Walter tapped one document. "This is an insurance policy covering unauthorized estate investments. If triggered, it allows for recovery of up to $800,000. Liam let out a breath like he'd been punched. "So, we're covered?" Walter's gaze hardened. "Not exactly." "There are conditions." Liam braced himself. "Of course there are." Walter leaned forward. "First, you must sign an official admission of wrongdoing. That means formally acknowledging your misuse of estate funds." Liam stiffened. "And if I don't," Walter's face didn't change, "then Natalie will have no choice but to file a legal claim against you, which would trigger a full forensic audit of the estate's finances." He paused. "Given the evidence, it's likely you'd be charged with fraud." Liam's face strained of color. "Fraud?" "Yes," Walter said simply, "and that would mean prison time." Liam's hand shook slightly as he wiped it over his face. "And the other conditions?" Walter folded his hands. "You will be required to attend financial counseling at your own expense. And you will have no further involvement in the estate, ever." Liam turned to me. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was almost pleading. "And you're okay with this?" I held his gaze. I don't want to see you in prison, Liam. But I'm not going to protect you from the consequences of what you did. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, he nodded. Fine. Walter slid the admission document forward. Liam took the pen with shaking hands and signed. And just like that, it was over. We stepped outside into the night air. Liam stood by his car, staring out at the city skyline. I don't know what to do now, he admitted. I hesitated before answering. You start over. Liam let out a weak laugh. How? I sighed. Studying him. The brother I had grown up with. The one who had lost himself chasing the wrong things. The farm still needs fixing, I said after a pause. You could help. His head snapped toward me, eyes wide with surprise. You'd let me? I met his gaze. You're still my brother, Liam, but this isn't about money anymore. If you want a second chance, you have to earn it. He didn't answer right away. But after a long pause, he nodded. Maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to fix what was broken. The days after the meeting with Walter felt heavy, filled with long silences and the weight of everything that had happened. I had spent so long angry at Liam, convinced that he would never change, that it felt strange to see him now, humbled, uncertain, and lost. But there we were, standing on Grandfather Henry's farm, staring at the overgrown fields, the broken fences, and the house that had once been filled with life. I barely recognize it, Liam muttered. I glanced at him. Yeah. Well, that's what happens when someone tries to sell a place instead of taking care of it. Liam exhaled sharply, but didn't argue. He wasn't fighting anymore. And for the first time in years I could see something shifting in him. We spent the next week clearing out the old barn, fixing the fences, and assessing the damage caused by years of neglect and bad decisions. Liam wasn't used to this kind of work, and at first, he struggled. But he showed up every morning, and to my surprise, he never complained. One evening, after an exhausting day of repairing the porch steps, I found him sitting on the front steps, staring out at the land as the sun dipped below the horizon. The golden light cast long shadows over the fields. The same view that Grandfather Henry used to love. I used to hate this place, Liam admitted, his voice quiet, hesitant. I thought it was a trap, a reminder of everything I didn't want to be. I sat down beside him, wiping the sweat from my forehead, and now he was silent for a long time before sighing. Now, I think I get it. Grandpa wasn't trying to hold us back, he was giving us something that actually mattered. I nodded, watching the wind move through the tall grass. He always thought 5 moves ahead. Liam chuckled, though there wasn't much humor in it. Yeah, and I never thought past the next dollar sign. The next few months passed in a rhythm of hard work and quiet realizations. Liam stuck with it, something I honestly hadn't expected. At first I kept my guard up, waiting for him to give up, to run when things got hard. But he didn't. He learned how to fix the equipment, how to plant crops properly, how to care for the land the way Grandfather had, and slowly I realized that he wasn't just doing it for me. He was doing it for himself. One afternoon we stood in the middle of the restored barn, the scent of fresh hay in the air. Liam wiped his hands on his jeans, glancing around. It actually looks like a real farm again. That's because it is. He let out a deep breath, nodding. Feels different. I studied him. You feel different? Liam hesitated before nodding. Yeah. For the first time, I believed him. A year after everything had fallen apart, we held a ceremony in Grandfather Henry's honor. We invited neighbors, old friends, and the few people in town who had known him well. Liam stood next to me as we unveiled a memorial plaque near the farmhouse. It simply read, Henry Carter, a man who built more than land. As the sun set over the farm, I realized something. Grandfather had always planned for this, not just for the land, not just for the money, but for us. He had known that Liam and I would never truly see eye to eye until something forced us to. He had built in safeguards, knowing Liam's weaknesses, but he had left the door open for redemption. And Liam had finally stepped through it. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I found Liam sitting on the porch, watching the stars. Still thinking about running back to Austin? I asked. He smirked. Nah. Turns out, I like the quiet. I sat down beside him, letting the cool night air settle around us. Do you think Grandfather knew this would happen? Liam asked after a while. I thought about it before answering. Yeah. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Liam sighed, a small smile on his lips. Yeah, me too. And for the first time in a long time, we sat there not as enemies, not as rivals, but as family.